Oh hey, it's Wes, and today it's time to talk about the Sony Zeiss 55 1.8. This is a long-term review, as are many of my reviews, and I thought that I would just clarify something. To a casual observer, one might think that, oh hey, he thinks that all the things that he reviews are fantastic. Because this is a long-term review, this is a lens, among my other long-term reviews, that I have used for over a year in a professional setting. Some more than a year. This one I think I've had for over 3 years. And the fact of the matter is, if I don't like something very much, I'm probably not going to have it long enough to have what you might call a long-term review. I might have a short-term review for something I don't terribly like, but if it stays around, it's going to get a long-term review. And that means I probably like it. Spoiler alert, it's pretty good. A little bit about this 55 1.8. This came out back in 2013, kind of in the Stone Age of the Sony full-frame mirrorless lineup. This was one of the first lenses that they produced for full-frame, and, incidentally, an early hit. It was immediately regarded as fantastic. People called it the Mini Otis, as there is an Otis 55 1.4. Now, I'm going to explain why that's not entirely accurate, but at the time, it was fantastic. However, a lot has changed in the last 6 years. So let's talk about that. With the categories. Number 1, build quality. This lens is a classic. We've got an all-metal design, metal lens hood, metal barrel, metal focus ring, but there is no O-ring on the back, as there is not on many of the older Sony full-frame lenses. So although this is rated as dust and moisture resistant, I wouldn't take this out in a rainstorm. I have had it in light precipitation many times over the last few years, and haven't had an issue, but a little caution there. There is also no image stabilization in this, but it is a pretty hardy lens. This lens has taken some bumps, and it just doesn't care. So, aside from the lack of O-ring, it is fantastic. Build quality, 8 out of 10. Next up, image quality, and this is where people were pretty surprised by how great this lens was. Like the Sony Zeiss 35 1.4, chromatic aberration is not very well controlled in this lens. It gets a bit messy when it's wide open and you have the sun shining in there. But the sharpness, ooh, the sharpness. This thing's going to resolve off pretty much every single pixel you have on your camera up to 42, and maybe even beyond. That was a big deal when this came out. Really only the 90mm macro lens that could touch that. But now there are a lot of modern lenses that are very, very sharp. So what's the big deal? It doesn't really get you that many points anymore just to be pretty sharp. Additionally, the flare resistance is okay, but when it does flare, it does some weird stuff. Have a look at these pictures. Instead of like having some nice glowing orbs flow across your picture or a nice warm wash, you get like a white or green tear through the middle of your picture that obscures everything that's going on. It's weird. Come on guys, that does not look great. That being said, this is still straight up for image quality, a very strong performer. As soon as you stop this down just a little bit, chromatic aberration clears up and it even gets a tiny bit sharper, especially around the edges. This is a very good lens for image quality, definitely not perfect though, so I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Image character. And this I think is what makes people keep this lens. They buy it for the sharpness, they keep it for the je ne sais quoi of what it grants them. How do I explain that? Well, keep looking at the image samples, because it is hard to explain. I've heard a lot of people that get this lens and they just don't let it go. Even people that have bought bigger, fancier, more professional lenses. It's hard to let this go, and I'm kind of in that position as well. The only time I use this lens professionally anymore is when it's a really cold winter day and I know I'm not going to be able to change my lenses, and I want kind of an in-between focal length that's a 55. I'll still flap that on one camera. And I'm generally still pretty pleased. I go back through my images afterwards and I think, what am I even using an 85 1.4 and a 35 1.4 for? For the bokeh, but whatever. It still looks fantastic. It's got that Zeiss pop, that indescribable way of separating the subject from the background that people talk about, but they don't really know exactly what it means. Some say it's because it has chromatic aberration that allows it to have this, the lack of overcorrected aspherical elements that our new, bigger, expensive, heavy lenses have. Maybe that's it, but I love the character of this lens. It pops right off the screen. Bokeh can be a little bit onion ringed, not quite round. It's got a 9-bladed aperture that's not super rounded, and it develops a slight swirl, but again, that might have something to do with what grants it that pop. It's definitely not perfect, but that tends to be what gives the lens character. It is distinctive. And if you like the look, and I like the look, I like it a lot, I have to give it a 9 out of 10 for character. Boom. Autofocus. This one kind of surprises me on this. This lens is old. I mean, it's not crazy old, but in the world of super fast, super modern, direct drive SSM autofocus lenses, there's nothing wrong here. This thing grabs focus, low light, high light, backlight. It is solid. It is not absolutely the fastest or most reliable focusing lens I have, but it is close. Maybe it's just because the elements are quite small in this lens. There's not a lot of glass to move around in here. It's just a 1.8. It's just a tiny little guy. Look how small this lens is. Okay, now it looks bigger because it's taking up the whole screen. But it's just a little lens with a little bit of glass, and it focuses fantastically well. One of the reasons it does so well in low light is that this actually has a t-stop value of 1.8 out of 1.8. What does that mean? Well, that's the transmission of the lens. That's how much light it actually lets in. So you have an aperture of 1.8, could in theory give you a maximum of a t-value of 1.8. It's the actual light coming in to the other side of the lens. For instance, the Otis, the 1.4, has a max t-stop of 1.5. It's pretty close. The Sigma Art lens 1.4 has the same t-stop, a 1.8. Same amount of light. Bigger aperture, slightly bigger bokeh, but same light. And the Sony Zeiss 1.4 phenomenal lens actually only has a t-value of 1.6. Not very far from this. So if you're shooting in low light, this thing is a very solid lens. It lets in a lot of light. Autofocus? 9 out of 10. No problem. Value. That's where this gets tricky. Even when this lens first came out, it cost less. And people said there is no way a 1.8 lens should cost that much. It's way overpriced. Now, it is a fantastic lens. It vastly outperforms most 1.8 lenses. Generally, you're buying a 1.4 lens, a professional lens, if you're going to get that kind of performance. And so that is why it costs this much. It is a strange lens, built to professional specs with a unprofessional aperture, whatever that means. So let's compare some prices. In the 1.8 realm, we have a Nikon 51.8 for $216, the cheap Sony 1.8 for $223, this guy for $999, and the Canon Plastic Fantastic 125. Boom, great value there. Not amazing quality. In the 1.4 realm, which is actually where the price lines up on this thing, you can get the Sigma 50 Art for $949, pretty much the same price. You can get the Sony Zeiss 1.4, another firecracker of a lens, $1,400. That's $400 more than that. Samyang Autofocus, $500. Nikon, kind of a cheapy 1.4, is $446. And the Canon very cheapy 1.4 is $299. That's a pretty good deal. And then there's the Canon 1.2s, which come in at $1,269 and $2,300 for the R lens. Whew. I mean, it's nice. So that's a lot of numbers. A lot of numbers. Which makes it pretty hard to parse what the value of this lens is. When I bought this lens many years ago, I paid $850 Canadian for it, which is about $650 American. That's a pretty good deal. I think it was just like $50 off. It was barely on sale. Since then, the price has gone up. So apparently, when I bought this lens, it was a good value because it has appreciated in value. That's nice. If I do want to sell it, I can make a profit. Not going to. But now, we're in the position that the price has gone up on this, and it now costs 4 times as much as the cheap Sony 1.8. 50mm. That is a lot, 5 times as much. And it's only $400 less than the 1.4, which, again, it's a little more weather sealed, wider aperture, more professional, tiny bit sharper around the edges. I mean, I find having a lighter lens is actually a bit of a value in and of itself, so I haven't been very tempted to get that 1.4 because, again, I like this lens. So at this point with this price, it is a bit of a tough sell. A lot of other lenses are now as sharp as this lens. Most of the modern lenses coming out now are. It's just what they do. They make glass better. Well, they make glass sharper. Question is it better? Overall though, for value, it's not a great value. It's a 6 out of 10. I'm sorry. So that gives us a total of 40 out of 50. What's that mean? I don't know, it's a nice round number, assuming my math is correct. But overall, my thoughts, I love this lens, I can't stop using this lens. I love the indescribable character that this lens gives to the pictures. Even though it's not perfect, the imperfection is one of the things that makes this thing really stand out. Why have I waited this long to produce a video about this lens when I've had it longer than most of my lenses? I don't know, I was afraid of saying something bad about it. Which, I mean, no lens is perfect, and it's our character flaws that make us interesting, including this lens. If you want one of these, or one of the lenses I talked about in this video, I've got links down in the description. Odds are, you either have one of these or don't have one of these, and that's the way that it is, because this has been out for so long. No surprises there. So, I'm not really here to sell you anything, just let you know what I think about this lens. It is a wonderful, compact, indispensable, travels light, it's great for family work and family photography, very discreet. Okay, I am done. Go take some photos.